It's no surprise to the casual observer of Inner Sphere history to hear the Draconis Combine has had a tumultuous relationship with mercenaries over the centuries. The Combine's reverence toward warriors loyal to House Eadeh made the idea of fighting for pay and temporary contractual agreements seem alien, and those mercenaries easy to mistrust. After all, if you work for a paycheck, the dragon believes you'll likely be willing to entertain switching sides for a bigger one. While today's video on the little 20-ton Flea will of course cover the BattleMech's history, which does date back to the last decades of the Age of War, we're also going to meet one of the more notable Flea mech warriors who personally witnessed the consequences of the Combine's fury against mercenaries who they felt could no longer be useful to the dragon. I hope you stick around because our little Flea has been on quite an adventure. Before Charlie could object, Gursky and his lowly Flea were gone. Headed toward the foremost section of the Blakist encampment, the Flea raked the front gates and stationary turrets with laser fire and incinerated guards with its flamer. The lighting throughout the base shifted from yellow to red as the turrets returned fire, concentrating on the nimble little mech. A hulking pair of Grand Titans stepped out from behind a large prefab hangar, clearly hunting Gursky. The Last Flight of the Black Condor, Shrapnel No. 10, by Matthew Cross. The story of the Flea begins in the mid-25th century as the great houses of the Inner Sphere frantically dumped billions of C-bills worth of resources into contracts with companies to produce brand new battlemechs. By 2475, mechs like the Banshee, Orion, Archer, and the Griffin were already popular and incredibly valuable designs for the companies that produced them and the armies in which they marched. Lighter designs such as the Commando, Wasp, and Firebee were also demonstrating value in mechs that could move quickly in and out of fire using speed and agility as defense instead of tens of tons of armor plating. While major players in military manufacturing were obviously making the biggest claims to the growing marketplace, smaller companies were also looking to grab a foothold. One of them was Todlet Industries, based on the planet Ariel, which was located in the Free Worlds League. They had previous experience building industrial mecha and robotics and were keen on seeing if their know-how would translate to battlemechs. Looking to capture a piece of the market for a light battlemech, the Todlet Industries design team developed plans for a 20-ton mech that could put to use the primitive but developing tech at the time. The prototype battlemech was designated the TP-1R Trooper, and after 6 years of development, it was ready to show off to prospective buyers. The Trooper was advertised as a scouting mech with just enough speed to make the argument thanks to the 145 rated primitive fusion engine. The 690 movement profile would pale in comparison to light mechs in the coming centuries, but keep in mind this is still the Age of War. The Trooper design team could brag of the machine's speed, easy to maintain structure, and an agile bird-like leg structure with exposed actuators to keep the profile narrow and sleek. With a standard structure, 10 single heatsinks, and a modern gyro, the mech was shaping up well. Unfortunately, the primitive cockpit assembly, which featured improved life support, did not allow for an ejection system. In an attempt to keep the mech simple and hard to hit, weapons pods were added instead of arms. This made for easier maintenance, but also drastically imperiled the mech warrior should the Trooper fall or be knocked down. The last of the structural additions was the armor, which consisted of 3 tons of primitive plate, which added up to 32 points of protection across the battlemech. Fitting its role as a scout rather than a heavy hitter, the scout was given a machine gun in the right arm, which fed from a half-ton of ammunition in the right torso, 2 small lasers set into the left arm, and a flamer set into the center torso. Now, to be fair, compared to some of its 20-ton peers, that's not an unimpressive volume of fire at close range. When presented with the final design, representatives from the Free Worlds League were impressed enough to place orders with Todlet for initial production runs. The trooper had made it to the big time. Even with all of its flaws, including a tendency to get mech warriors killed as they tried to climb out of the cockpit under fire, the trooper saw deployment and was considered a limited success. Of course, when the time came to update it with standardized tech, the FWL buyers were eager to see what the company could do with it. After extensive reworkings of the trooper, the resulting upgrade looked so different that the marketing team decided it needed an entirely new designation. The battlemech that stomped off the assembly lines in 2501 was christened the FLE-4 Flea. Though it would never achieve the widespread success and adoption across the inner sphere as mechs like the Stinger and Locust, the Flea was considered a commercial success. So much so that when Todlet Industries was bought out by Earthworks Incorporated in 2581, additional Flea production lines were set up on 5 worlds to keep up with demand. If there's anything better for an economy than war, it's the occupation and reconstruction of a defeated enemy. My god, the government's going to be dumping cash out the window by the truckload. Boys, mount up. Let the rest of the idiots fight for scraps on the ground. We're gonna go get us some of them government cash trucks for ourselves. Comment attributed to General Mechanics President Webb Kaladin, 2596. The FLE-4 Flea that would earn its keep in the coming years contained elements of the inspiring trooper but was very much its own design. Its internal structure was an in-house produced Earthwork trooper chassis wrapped around a now standardized GM120 Fusion engine. This didn't shift the movement profile for the Flea, but we're definitely saying goodbye to the days of primitive core features. Like the trooper, the Flea carried just 10 single heatsinks and had 32 points of armor, though the Flea's Livingston ceramics plate weighed in at just 2 tons to the trooper's primitive 3 tons. The Flea's cockpit assembly was standardized and included an injection system to lengthen the lifespan of your average mech warrior. Clearly a vanity play, right? The remaining 7 tons of mass were devoted to the Flea's weapons loadout, which was where the mech truly shined. In contract negotiations with potential buyers, Todlet and later Earthworks sales team could argue that what set the Flea apart from its peers at the 20-ton mark was the nudging of the opportunity cost table towards firepower over speed and durability. Of course, that kind of design lent itself to a more bold purchaser, as well as a brave mech warrior tasked with running around in the mech. The primary damage dealer was a Martel large laser installed into the mech's right arm. While not the heaviest hitting energy weapon out there, it would be a surprise to see a light mech carrying the 5-ton Persuader. You think you're getting a medium laser or some machine guns, and instead the tech is scraping off the gristle from the inside of your cockpit a few hours later. Backing up the large laser in the left arm were a pair of Martel small lasers, which provided their modest close-range fire. The expectation for the Flea was to avoid fighting until the moment was right, and typically that would be in close range. If you're out trading shots with an Atlas in an open field, you're doing the Flea wrong. The last addition to the mech was an Olympian flamer set into the center torso facing the rear firing arc. Why facing the rear? Because sometimes you just want to set everything behind you on fire while you get out of dodge. Acting in its traditional role as a scout, the Flea could hit a target with an unexpectedly powerful amount of fire, relying upon its better-than-average speed to break contact as quickly as possible to avoid taking too much return fire. The Flea would also perform well against vehicles, light armor, and infantry, which was important in the coming years as the forming SLDF was tested in its fight against the periphery nations in the Reunification War. In one of the earliest records of the Flea in action, 2/3 Marik militia Fleas found themselves in the unenvious position of needing to keep a pair of hunchbacks alive when they were set upon by a trio of Lyran's piloting commandos. The House Steiner mechs were able to flank and take down one of the hunchbacks with combined fire, but were in turn left vulnerable to the Fleas, who were dismissed as inconsequential. The Marik militia Fleas began to cut down the commandos with their own combined fire. The first commando went down after its leg was sheared off, and the other 2 were suddenly looking for an exit as a surviving hunchback turned and the Fleas closed in. After just a few minutes, all 3 commandos were downed in exchange for that one original hunchback. Flea, Orlonzo's mind supplied. He tagged the approaching mech by its name and nomenclature, but it took him another heartbeat to convert the data into any usable form. At this range, he couldn't tell if it was packing a heavy laser in lieu of arms, but he hoped not. One following is a GRF Griffin. Korolevsky continued in a dull monotone, which surprised the commander because he wasn't sure the NCO had been speaking at all. Orlonzo felt his body still. At 20 tons, the Flea was no one's pick for a heavyweight. His carriers were too thin-skinned to last long in a direct-fire engagement, but the thin-legged battlemech wasn't much better off, and it surrendered too much range to his missile tracks besides. Better Days, Shrapnel No. 8, by John David Karnitz. The Flea's arrival in 2501 was convenient as the 26th century ushered in the establishment of the Star League and unification, at least legally, of the great houses of the Inner Sphere. One might think that military production and procurement would decline in an era often described as a technological golden age of peace, but those who understand all the competition and animosity boiling under the surface knew the war was never far off. With the Inner Sphere technically at peace, the Star League and the Great House Lords shifted their focus to the nations of the periphery which had resisted First Lord Cameron's call to join the League. Though each of the nations that skirted the Inner Sphere had their own motivations and methods of asserting their independence, none of them were eager to join. The hawkish members of the Star League argued that the easiest way to usher everyone into the League's fold was through military force. The Star League Defense Force was in its infancy at the time, and confidence was high that this massive military machine could easily steamroll anything that the periphery nations could field. Incidents like the Malagrada Crisis and Bloody Santiago set the Star League and the periphery nations on a collision course for war, and the Flea would participate. Since many of the new Fleas were purchased for Free Worlds League units, one was most likely to spot the mech deployed in the campaign against the neighboring Magistracy of Canopus. Though not as nasty and brutal as the campaign against the Taurian Concordat, the SLDF, supported by House Marik units, faced a tough fight against people who had made a compelling argument that they just wanted to be left alone. Without evidence suggesting the contrary, the FLE-4 served admirably in the Reunification War, and at least we can assume that they sold well along with the other battlemechs produced as the SLDF absorbed catastrophic losses in the unexpectedly long conflict. Though the fighting itself across the periphery was brutal and exposed much of the hypocrisy of the Star League's stated principles, the mechs themselves served their purpose on both sides. This trial by fire would end up defining how major conflicts were fought for the next half-millennium. Captain General Marion Marik was among the least hawkish of the Star League Council and opposed the belligerent approach taken by the First Lord. To her, there was a vast gulf between cajoling someone into joining the Star League, as her father had done by fair means and foul, and forcing them to obey the Star League. The Canopian Campaign, Sourcebook, Reunification War. Before we descend into the chaos of the Succession Wars, we were blessed by the Flea's first official variant just a couple of decades after the mech's introduction. The FLE-15 that was first recorded in 2523 received a boost in armor coverage to 3 tons of standard plate after the large laser was yanked from the mech to create a more balanced build. The FLE-15's primary weapons consisted of a pair of standard medium lasers split between the arms along with a pair of machine guns in the same limbs. The 2 small lasers remained in the mech, but they were split between the side torsos and faced that rear firing arc. The last addition was a center torso flamer that was retained from the previous build, thankfully, but this time they went ahead and turned it around to face the front. Because honestly, if you can't see the things you're setting on fire, what is the point? The final product was a better, more rounded design which didn't sacrifice too much armor for comfort. Some Flea purists might balk at the loss of the large laser, but they're not the ones making this video, so I win. There was one other project worth noting in the 26th century, as the team led by Alexei Demidov at Earthworks began to tinker with the possibility of creating a 15-ton battlemech using the Flea as inspiration. Dropping the mech's mass to that lower level left very little in the way of armor or weaponry, but the prototype FLE-14 did have speed on its side. The 135 Fusion engine weighed just 4.5 tons, but could accelerate the mech up to a swift 151 km per hour on open, unobstructed terrain. The 914 movement profile was further bolstered with the addition of 4 jump jets to the mini Flea's legs at the cost of 2 tons of mass. With just 1 ton of armor, speed was crucial for the mech's survival and its goal of moving a single standard medium laser across the battlefield very quickly. Unlike many experimental prototypes, the FLE-14 Flea did actually see a full production run, with 500 of the little buggers being produced for sale. Unfortunately for the Earthworks investors, the attempt to create a market at the 15-ton mass point ended up failing. The FLE-14's fragility and very modest weaponry made for a very tough sales pitch. Almost all the completed contracts were with the Free Worlds League, which ended up dumping the ultralight mech into garrison units, where even then there were complaints that a single squad of infantry that had obtained an SRM launcher could take out the Flea if it wasn't constantly on the run. While it did technically hit the scene first, which explains the 14 designation, the limited production and poor reception of the FLE-14 made it easy for the design to be abandoned. The FLE-15 design was just superior in all ways except speed. There were a few sightings of the FLE-14 as late on the timeline as the First Succession War, but their numbers could be counted in the double digits. For all intents and purposes, the design was extinct. So apparently, he pulled out blueprints from the bottom drawers of the new Dallas core, and now we have 6 brand new FLE-14 Fleas stomping their 15-ton asses around our proving grounds. We'll apparently work out any licensing deals with Earthworks later on. Anyway, Donahue seems to think these ultralights will be the future on the battlefield, despite us just building models that are centuries old. He wants the eggheads to soup it up with some advanced tech, but it's still going to be the tiniest, most fragile thing on the battlefield. Not even the fastest either. I don't know, man, but there was a reason those Star League era folks decided not to make more than a handful of ultralight chassis. The What Ifs and Should Nots of Battlemech Engineering, Shrapnel number 23, by Matthew Cross. As the Inner Sphere descended into the fire and fury of the Succession Wars, the Flea became a rare sight everywhere but within the Free Worlds League, where it was still in production by Earthworks Incorporated in very limited numbers, and largely just to produce the parts necessary to maintain the mechs already in existence. Battlemechs like the Locust, Stinger, and Wasp overwhelmed the market and became the staples for 20-ton Battlemech production. It wasn't until Wolf's Dragoons began making waves as a new premier mercenary unit that the Flea would see renewed interest. Under an exclusive contract with the unit, Earthworks was asked to produce new Fleas to replace the mechs lost by the Dragoons in their various adventures across the Inner Sphere. It must have been quite the contract, as Earthworks opened up 2 Flea production lines, one on Asuncion and the other on Bernardo, to hit production goals. That purchase can be credited for saving the Flea from extinction. Though it would never be as popular and common as the other 20-tonners, it would endure, like any good Flea should. Eventually, another production line was set up on Victoria within the Capellan Confederation to keep up with demand, suggesting there was growing interest in the rare design. As a member of Wolf's Dragoons, Mechwarrior Roy Romer prided himself on avoiding combat in his Flea 15. In the years following the Fourth Succession War, Roy used his mech to cause chaos on the backfield behind enemy lines. Setting fires and spraying logistics lines with machine gun rounds sounds like way too much fun. It's likely that the Flea's ability to be underestimated by the enemy persists far down the timeline. Another one of the more famous or infamous Dragoon Flea mech warriors was Ulzana Whitehand, who earned respect early on as testing showed that she had remarkable reflexes and hand-eye coordination, which suited life as a scout mech warrior. Her temperament also lent itself to a raucous and thrill-seeking series of life choices, which landed her into trouble with clan authorities, and ended up resulting in an opportunity to test into the warrior caste. Ulzana's trial was a breeze, but she was relegated to piloting a hovercraft due to her background as a freeborn. In a series of wacky events that would make a good novel, Ulzana was tapped to join Wolf's Dragoons on their reconnaissance mission into the Inner Sphere. This included an upgrade to Mechwarrior and an assignment to an FLE-15 Flea. Ulzana proved her mettle time and time again, acting as a scout and calling in air and artillery strikes on hapless enemies who didn't know they were fighting clan mech warriors. It was all going quite swimmingly until the disaster on Misery, where Ulzana's beloved Flea, the Ringmaster, was disabled in a desperate fight against the Combine Ryukin, tasked with obliterating Wolf's Dragoons. It was reported that Ulzana witnessed one of her lancemates being executed after ejection from his mech and that triggered a desperate last rush through the enemy ranks. She fired on the Ryukin while running at top speed, avoiding their return fire while dishing out everything she could. A medium laser to a Panther's cockpit dropped a Combine mech, and then a desperate charge at a Phoenix Hawk resulted in both mechs crashing to the ground in a heap of smashed mech parts. Though Ulzana survived the fight, her battle mech, as well as many of her fellow Dragoons, did not. The memories of what happened on Misery were left to percolate over the next few years until she was called back into the fight in 3032, piloting a brand new Flea designated the FLE-16, fresh off the Earthworks assembly lines. As part of the Black Widow Battalion, Ulzana continued to serve with distinction, outlasting most scout Mechwarriors who tended to live short but glorious lives. Eventually, after more than earning it, Ulzana Whitehand returned to Outreach to train new Mechwarriors before officially retiring in 3039 to focus on raising her children. The FLE-16 was a Succession Wars refit that carried a larger 180 fusion engine at the cost of removing some of the mech's weaponry. This trade of firepower for speed created a mech more similar to the other 20-ton Inner Sphere battle mechs at the time. It still had just 10 single heat sinks, carried 3 tons of armor plating, and could lash out with its paired Martel medium lasers split between the arms. Thankfully, the Olympian Flamer was retained in the center torso. There's not too much to say about the FLE-16 other than it's a much more traditional take on a 20-ton light mech. That might be a good thing or a bad thing depending upon your risk tolerance and desire to blow stuff up. The tiny Flea was nominally faster than the larger Griffin, but the smaller machine either had a less skilled pilot or found the going tougher on its thin legs because it stumbled repeatedly even before the salvo found it. Explosion after explosion merged into an incandescent flash, and when it cleared, the tumbling wreckage that had been a 20-ton battle mech flew apart when it intersected the ground. Better Days, Shrapnel No. 8 by John David Karnitz. With the end of the Dragoons' exclusive contract in 3041, the Earthworks brass saw potential in revamping the Flea design to incorporate recovered Star League technology. The resulting FLE-17 produced benefited from the variety of new elements intended to amplify the mech's advantages and pre-existing role as a powerful scout. The Flea's frame was upgraded to an Earthwork Trooper 2 endosteel design which wrapped around the tried-and-true standard GM 120 fusion engine. Though the general-purpose speed of the mech was not changed, the installation of a mask system in the mech's center torso provided a temporary speed boost up to 119 km per hour. The 3 tons of standard plate were not touched, and the 10 single heatsinks remained as well, possibly due to cost concerns or access to double heatsink technology. The traditional loadout was amplified with the swap from standard medium lasers to a pair of the new Martel medium pulse lasers, which offered vastly increased accuracy and slightly improved damage in exchange for a much shorter range. The 2 rear-facing Martel small lasers were left alone, as well as the Olympian Flamer in the center torso. The FLE-17 was a quite savvy build for a battle mech that already sought to only operate at close range. The medium pulse lasers made the Flea much more dangerous to other light battle mechs which relied on speed to survive. The majority of the Flea-17s produced ended up in the hands of the Capellan Confederation after the mech's blueprints were obtained through questionable means by the Maskarovka in the mid-3040s. Earthworks saw the demand and figured the Capellans were going to find a way to produce them anyway, so they just went with the flow. The 17 was also produced by Wolf's Dragoons, who continued to value the mech for its punch. Mechwarriors appreciated it, the technicians loved it, and the Flea continued to benefit from the ease of repair principles that were laid down with the original Trooper design. Hopping down the timeline to 3063, a strange and somewhat mysterious variant of the Flea was spotted in the Chaos March planets in the hands of several mercenary units. It was most likely a refit of the FLE-17 as it shared most of the hardware elements including endosteel and mask. A half-ton of armor was shaved off to bolster a very close-range weapon set tailored to fighting in the streets and alleyways of an urban environment. The Fire Ant Flea carried 6 machine guns split between its left and right arm mounts, which all fed from a half-ton of ammunition stored in the center torso. 3 flamers added their uniquely satisfying damage, 1 in each side torso and the 3rd in the open head critical. Though the Fire Ant did sacrifice a bit of its durability, the short-range damage and visceral joy of unloading on a target with machine guns and flamers really can't be overstated. When questioned about the variant, Earthworks insisted they had no hand in it. I suspect Big Red 40 Tech had something to do with it. Just a few years later, in 3068, the FLE-19 variant was produced, which took advantage of endo steel, but otherwise looked a lot like the classic original Flea. That is, until you look at the weapons loadout, which consisted of 8 light machine guns organized in 2 arrays, 1 in each arm. All of the MGs fed from a half-ton of ammunition set in the left torso. The center torso flamer should surprise no one, but the interesting addition had to be the rocket launcher 10 in the right torso, which could provide a one-time flight of 10 rockets toward the target of your choosing. Apparently, the primary buyer for the FLE-19 was the Capellan Confederation again, and Earthworks representatives were exceedingly clear, probably due to advice from legal counsel, that this variant wasn't intended to stand toe-to-toe against battlemechs unless it was part of a swarm. The Capellans don't really know how to take it easy, so in 3071, yet another variant of the Flea designated the FLE-20 hit the scene sporting endosteel, mask, 10 double heat sinks, and for the first time, 2.5 tons of stealth armor. Of course, the armor required the installation of an ECM, which the Flea-20 had in the form of a Guardian ECM suite nestled into the right torso. The mech's damage was produced by a pair of ER medium lasers split between the arms and a light particle projection cannon in the left torso. In the same report that included a description of this variant, the Mechwarrior Observer noted that the Flea-20 was carrying a full squad of Fa-Shi battle armor troopers. So yeah, that's apparently a thing. Good luck getting a full night's sleep now. Going to the other side of the mountains was one of the most frightening and exciting phrases that an aspiring Dragoon could hear in the years 3037 to 3050. Armed with low-powered weapons, young mech warriors were sent to fight Kerensky's training battalion soon after graduating an assignment. Journeying to the rugged wilderness occupied by the Black Widow training battalion was more than a simple initiation into the ranks of Wolf's Dragoons. It was a young mech warrior's first experience with the tactics of the clans, intended to rate their potential as leaders in the conflict that both Natasha Kerensky and Jamie Wolf knew was coming. More tales of the Black Widow's company. Writers Michael A. Stackpole and Anthony Pryor. As the Flea hops along with the rest of us into the IlClan era, Earthworks Limited hasn't been shirking their duty to keep the mech updated with the latest and greatest technology. The life of the light battlemech mech warrior may be nasty, brutish, and short, but there's no need to make it easier for the bad guys. The FLE-21, first produced in 3139, took advantage of endosteel, 3 tons of stealth armor, 10 double heat sinks, and a more powerful 180 light fusion engine, which pushed the movement profile to 914.0. This much speedier Flea was also given a supercharger in its center torso, which could occasionally boost that top speed to just over 194 km per hour, or a 918 movement profile. The Guardian ECM was required in the right torso to facilitate the stealth armor and further improve the mech's survivability as an Operation Sneaky Sneak Roadrunner. Twin ER medium lasers were the primary punch for the FLE-21, but they were backed up by an extended range flamer set into the center torso. For the uninitiated, the ER flamer was first seen amongst the Jade Falcons in 3067, and 3 years later the Federated Sons produced their own equivalent version. The ER flamer weighs 1 ton, takes up 1 critical, and generates 4 heat. The max range was pushed out to 7 hexes for the same damage but half the heat generating effect. When turned against hapless infantry, the ER flamer does 2d6 burst fire damage rather than 4d6. While the damage production for the FLE-21 isn't spectacular, the combination of stealth armor, ECM, double heat sinks, and the mech's incredible speed created a surprisingly flexible and dangerous machine. The Capellans have recognized the mech's value over the past century and proved to be eager buyers of the Flea. Earthworks has pushed production across 3 planets now, and those who are witness to the Capellan advance are likely to see several, if not many, Fleas in their first scouting waves. Wolf's Dragoons also saw the potential of the FLE-21 and put in their own order for more of our swift little 20-ton friends. Now, before we leap on to the rest of our day, I did want to take another look at the FLE-21 for a totally unofficial and non-canon Mechfrog variant. Someone recently asked why I have to keep saying that every time, and I have to explain that the internet has a lot of people on it who get very angry about silly things. The FLE-21MF is envisioned as an advanced tech version of the 21 produced by Earthworks, with some fancier bits both local and pillaged from the carcasses of clan battlemechs taken down in the recent conflict between the Capellans and Alaric's new Star League. Structurally, not much has changed beyond the installation of an XL gyro to shave off a little mass for use elsewhere. The 3 tons of stealth armor remained, as well as the Guardian ECM. That left the weapons loadout, which consisted of 2 improved heavy-medium lasers split between the arms that could dish out their 10 damage apiece out to 9 hexes. The only other weapon is a clan-spec ER medium laser installed into the head critical location. All 3 lasers were aided in their accuracy by a left torso targeting computer. The resulting menace could do its 10-10-7 damage consistently, as firing all 3 on the run left the 21MF at just 1 into the red each turn. While my variant is vulnerable thanks to the XL gyro and improved heavy-medium lasers and their tendency to explode, it's a matter of just a small variance in life expectancy. Once you're taking critical hits in the Flea's center torso, what's the presence of a couple of extra gyro crits going to do to shorten your life? If you'd like to give this Flea a try, I've included the free PDF record sheet and Alpha Strike card and down in the video notes below. Enjoy. So why do we love the Flea? I have to admit that for a long time I dismissed this little 20-ton monster on very superficial grounds. The mech's boxy and stubby presentation across the original TROs made it easy for me to move on to sleeker and sultrier designs like the Locust, Wasp, and Stinger. Taking the time to dig into the mech beyond looks and seeing that it was offering something slightly different than its peers built new appreciation. For those willing to accept the risk of traveling a little slower but making a bigger explosion upon arrival, the Flea offers a good option. The CGL era glow-up by Alan Blackwell has gone a long way to revamp the Flea's image, and hearing that it's been embraced not just by the Free Worlds League but also the Capellan Confederation further down the timeline is promising. Inclusion of the new plastic mini in the Mercenaries box didn't hurt either. I'm curious what you think about our little Flea. Is it worth taking as a 20-ton option? Is there a variant that you think is peak Flea? Did the entire video make you itchy? Let me know in the comments and we can keep the discussion going. Thanks as always for coming out today. If you think the video deserves it and you want to show your support, the easiest way to do that is to hit the like button, subscribe, and even leave a comment. All of those things make the YouTube algorithm happy. If you want to go one step further, direct support through Ko-fi is ideal, and the link is in the video notes. Though YouTube channel memberships are still a thing, it's nice not to have to rely entirely on Google's good graces. No matter what, it is appreciated. Without strong community support, this would not be possible. If you'd like to join the nonsense and even share your own painted battlemechs, join our Discord server where people get a heads up about what's coming up next and you have a chance to chat about all things BattleTech. With that, I'll say thanks again. Please go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.